So Memorial Day weekend has arrived, and with that comes, in so many ways, the beginning of summer and the time we can really start checking the standings. This is Locked On MLB.
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, Locked On Diamondbacks crossover. I am your host for this, or at least the co-host for this voyage into the bottom of the baseball sea. My name is Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. Over there is my once-a-week co-host. Please identify yourself.
Miller Thomas, host of Locked On Diamondbacks over here. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 for my personal account. You can look up the show account, Locked On Diamondbacks, both Twitter and Instagram. And please hit subscribe on the Locked On Diamondbacks YouTube.
Well, you can follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Well, those of you who've been listening to the show are probably sick to death of me saying this, but I'm going to say it again anyway. The season, in my mind, can be broken into three segments: opening day to Memorial Day to the trade deadline to the end of the season. Each one of those is roughly 2 months, and each one of those 2 months is a critical turning point that you can have in terms of judging your team. The idea of it's too early to look at the standings, it's too early to judge a team, that time has passed. We are now in some summertime, some summertime.
Summer.
And we can take a look at our teams and have a realistic look at which teams are surprising us and could build upon that, which teams are really devastatingly disappointing. And as we go on, especially in the second segment, I'm going to go over a little bit of my own personal metric, which I have to calculate whether or not a team is having the summer that their fans deserve. So look at, and just quickly, by the way, so there is no confusion, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. So, hey, Miller, tell us a little bit about some of the teams that are contending and which teams are surprising. And I'm very glad you haven't rubbed it in my face that the Diamondbacks beat the Red Sox.
Yeah, I mean, they only beat them in the finale because the Red Sox were able to take the first two games of the series, despite Rafael Devers not playing. But I think probably the biggest surprise of the season is probably the Arizona Diamondbacks, with still their third best record in the National League, one of the highest scoring teams in all of baseball, number 2 in runs scored in the National League. They lead the National League in batting average as well. Their pitching has been just fine. I mean, Merrill Kelly put on a masterclass performance in Sunday's win. So the D-backs have two frontline elite starters. They got great offense. And so that team is clicking and buzzing right now. So I think they probably are the biggest surprise, at least in the National League, during the first half of the season. But probably in the American League, I think a team that we discussed a lot in the offseason, because they gave out a huge contract to a pitcher who always gets hurt in Jacob deGrom. But the Texas Rangers are making a lot of noise right now in the AL West. Their run differential on the season is plus 123, which leads the American League, better than the Tampa Bay Rays. And that's, of course, of us recording this at 4:21 p.m. on Sunday. So this Texas Rangers team, I mean, they've gotten great contributions from the Adolis Garcias of the world. The Simeons and Corey Seagers have been pretty good. I mean, Seager's been like in and out the lineup, but Simeon's been pretty good. The rotation, I mean, they got a whole bunch of above average major leaguers in that rotation. I mean, of course, deGrom, he's been hurt a lot of the season, but we still have Martin Perez, Nathan Eovaldi. You got rookies like Josh Young stepping up. This Rangers team has been a great surprise. They've been dominant offensively all season, and it's one of the teams I'm going to be looking out for the rest of the season to see if there's a regression hit coming for them, because I think they're super talented, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if they make a little run in the playoffs.
Well, you know, I've been extraordinarily critical of the Texas Rangers, and Bryce Patrick, our dear friend from Locked On Rangers, he texted me to remind him that I said a bunch of bad things about the Rangers going into the season. You and I have been critical of them. And he says a Ranger Twitter is going to come at us with guns ablazing. And I said, bring it on. I do think I think Bochy has been the biggest acquisition that they've made this year. I think Bochy knows how to handle his staff, knows how to handle a pitching staff, and he knows which buttons to press. And this is why he's a Hall of Fame manager. And sometimes a manager is, there have been Hall of Fame managers who joined a team where things didn't work out. Like we saw what happened with Joe Madden when he went to the Angels. Jim Leland I think should be in the Hall of Fame as a manager, and he had a disastrous season with the Colorado Rockies. There's sometimes it doesn't work, but I think Bochy with this team and with this talent has been a perfect fit. And it means that you're going to have the potential for an exciting summer in Texas. We talked last week about some of the disappointing teams. We brought up San Diego and everything. I'll tell you, the thing that is interesting when you have a disappointing division, because right now the American League Central is a mess. Yeah. And the National League Central isn't much better. Which means all of a sudden, as we're recording this, the Detroit Tigers are only a game out of first place.
Disgusting.
It's disgusting, but it's there. And the Cincinnati Reds, who had a wonderful, they had a wonderful series against the Chicago Cubs, who are spiraling. The Reds are only a few games out of first, despite being a sub 500 team. They're only a few games out of first. And they have a bunch of hitters and players who are playing very well in the minor leagues. Thank you very much. If you're the Reds or if you're the Tigers, and obviously the Pirates are just barely out of first place at this point, and you're like, there's a real chance for you to do something positive with your team right now. Yes, that it's because St. Louis has been disastrous, because Cleveland's been a massive disappointment so far. Minnesota has been in first place, but nominally. I mean, they've dropped going into Memorial Day. They've dropped 7 of their last 10 games. They played the Blue Jays over the weekend. It was like, well, technically someone has to win this series. I think you could see some team going into this middle third. And this is why I break it down like this. If you're the Tigers, if you're the Reds going like, wait a second, what are we doing? Let's improve the team. We if no one else wants it, let's go for it.
Normally I would agree, but I don't know what a playoff berth would even do for those teams, because you still look at those teams on paper and you're like, if they do make the playoffs, they're not doing anything in the postseason. Like both these Centrals, I'm just like, I don't care which of those division winners make it to the postseason. Like they're not going to do anything. And so I'm like, I would just rather concede the season. Like if I'm the Cincinnati Reds, what does winning 85 games, winning the NL Central and making the postseason even do for me as a team? I think I would rather just go back in the lottery with a chance at getting the number 1 pick if I'm the Cincinnati Reds, and be like, you know what, let me actually still try to auction off my players, even though it's crazy that they're kind of in this race for the division. It's like, if Luke Weaver's my number 1 starter or Hunter Green's my number 1 starter entering a postseason, like, do I really have any chance of doing anything? Like most of the time we've seen the last few years, we've got your NL wildcard teams like the Philadelphia Phillies and the Padres and Braves make some noise, but are the Reds or the Tigers on any of those teams' level when it comes to talent? Absolutely not. So I think it would honestly be kind of foolish to think, oh, because I'm the Tigers with Eduardo Rodriguez and Spencer Torkelson, let me go out there and try and win the division, because we're going to make some real noise in the postseason this year.
Allow me to retort.
Okay.
You partially retorted, by the fact that we saw the Philadelphia Phillies, who I don't think anyone was comparing to the 1927 Yankees last year when they made the postseason, that they were the definition of an afterthought. They weren't supposed to get past St. Louis, and they got to within 2 freaking wins of winning the World Series. There are instances, but, also, and again, what if, and this is a strange concept to say out loud, what if you give your fans a reason to show up? You give your team a reason to wake up in the morning and play hard. You have a fun season. You have a season where all of a sudden you go like, hey, I thought this was going to be a dead year in Detroit. I thought this was going to be a meaningless year in Cincinnati. And all of a sudden, some of those young players, you give them their first taste of being involved in a real pennant race and say, all right, we did that. And maybe sometimes that first step is what you need to build upon. Or I don't know, isn't it more fun? I mean, you're with the Diamondbacks. Isn't this year more fun than it was a couple of years ago when they were like a 100-loss team?
I agree.
Isn't it more fun to walk in to say, hey, our team doesn't stink this year?
But I think we're conflating saying the Phillies, who made it as a wild card team, even this D-backs team, with two teams who I think on paper are just atrocious. And because of the divisions that they play in, they are on a higher level, and we're viewing them through a different prism just because of the division we play in. There's no Bryce Harper on the Cincinnati Reds or Detroit Tigers team that could take over a postseason and just be the best player in the world and carry your team to the World Series. Unless you're telling me Miguel Cabrera at age 40 or Jonathan India on the Cincinnati Reds is heating up. I don't see the talent for those teams to get over the hump. So it's like, I agree to the point of the pennant race. The players should try to get as much experience in that. But once those teams are in it the last couple of weeks, so why not just, play in that pennant race, have that good month of September where you're in it. You're like, we're a couple games back. And you know what? That final week, just tank. Just say, you know what? We were in the pennant race. We didn't make the playoffs. It's okay. We still had a great season. And we had you thinking we were in it until the end.
Well, look, that sets up what I want to talk about our second half in a very big way.
What a segue.
But look, just because they're a long shot doesn't mean you should maybe put your money on a little bit. If you're going to be doing that, may I recommend you head over to FanDuel. Now, truth be told, we're recording this before we know what happens in the Celtics and the Heat game. So, hey, all I do is this. Denver's in it. And whether Denver's playing the Celtics or Denver's playing the Heat, or by some loophole, Denver's playing the Lakers again, you can go to FanDuel because they got the no sweat first bet. Oh, wait a second. I got to do more than talk about FanDuel. There, okay, it's up there. Okay, I did. All right. Oh boy. All right. You know what? I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to keep going here. FanDuel's got the no sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. That's more money than the A's are spending on their players this year. And do you know what? If you use FanDuel, you can get a safe and secure app, which you need to have when you're making bets. You get paid instantly, and they get the money. And there's no better place to bet all the playoff action, whether it's Stanley Cup, whether it's the NBA Finals, or whether it's the Detroit Tigers versus the Cincinnati Reds in the World Series. That's right. It's a rematch of the 1940 World Series, which I remembered right off the top of my head. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association.
Boom.
Little cough there.
All
right, we're here with Miller Thomas. We're doing a Locked On crossover here, Memorial Day edition. Now, those of you who've been following the podcast, I know I have been over the years, know that I post Who Owns Baseball every day on Sully Baseball. But I'm doing something else, and I've done this for each of the last couple of years, and it is based upon my notion of what a baseball team's purpose is. What is the purpose of a baseball team? What is the job of a baseball team? What is a baseball team there to provide? Miller Thomas.
Win games or provide entertainment doing so.
Provide entertainment for the summer. It is summer entertainment. That is its purpose. It is not there. Oh, let's go to the game. All right. Every team should put their best players on the field and try to win.
They should.
They should. That's what they should do. That's entertaining. I'm not saying they're going to win, but inevitably there's some teams that will not win. But a baseball team's job is to provide entertainment for the summer. That's what Cincinnati and Detroit have to be thinking one way. Wait, are we doing our jobs by providing entertainment for the summer, or turn it to your fans, say, well, what we're trying to do is develop a new draft strategy. Sometimes it's the good thing to punt. A few years ago, the Astros punted. They traded everything that wasn't nailed down. And a lot of the players that got back in return in some of those trades wound up being part of the team that cheated their way to the 27 World Series title. Cubs did the same thing. But if you have a chance, we're in a division and no one else wants this, let's take it. Now, the last couple of years, I have developed my own. Obviously, I have my Who Owns Baseball stat. I have another stat, which I keep a track of, which is called the summer score.
Oh.
And every year, this is how the summer score works. Basically, what I try to do is I try to create a tally to see who has the largest tally at the end of the season to see, did you provide your fan base with an entertaining summer? And some of the teams that have a decent summer score didn't make the playoffs, but their fans got some entertainment. Here's how you calculate it. Every day from Memorial Day to, it doesn't start until after Memorial Day. Because before Memorial Day, it's just the early part of the season. It's too early to tell. But between Memorial Day and the 1st of July, every day when you wake up and your team's in a playoff spot, your team gets 1 point. Between July 1st and July 31st, every day you wake up in the morning and your team is in a playoff spot, they get 2 points. It means a little more. It's a little later in the season.
That makes sense.
Between the end of July and the end of August, basically for the month of August, every day you're in a playoff spot, you get 3 points.
Whoa.
Between September 1st and the end of the season, every day you're in a playoff spot.
How many?
You get 4.
Whoa.
And in that month of September, every day you wake up and you're within a game of a playoff spot, you
How
get
many?
1. You get a 1. So basically, it's like, we wake up. We could be in a playoff spot by the end of the day. So obviously, if you wake up in September and you're a playoff team, you're like, oh man, it could happen. Okay. So what I'm going to do is this. I didn't tell you I was going to do this. I did this for the 2021 and 2022 seasons. A perfect summer score from May 31st to the end of the regular season. In 2021, the White Sox, the Rays, the Astros, the White Sox, the Rays, the Dodgers, and the Giants had perfect summer scores.
Wow.
The Astros were 1 off because they were not in first place on May 31st. The teams that had high summer scores were the Astros 321, the Red Sox 312, and then you saw like the Yankees. The Yankees went months between being in the playoff team. Then they had a great second half of the season. So they had 167, which was just barely ahead of the Oakland A's. The Oakland A's, who didn't make the playoffs in 2021, but didn't make the postseason at all, but gave their fans a 164 summer score. The Blue Jays gave their fans a 53 summer score. The Cleveland Indians, and they're finally being called the Indians, gave them a 5 summer score. The Dodgers and Giants had perfect summer scores. The Brewers had a huge summer score. The Padres in 2021, a season that they finished sub 500, had a 200 summer score. Even though they finished sub 500, they were still a playoff team on September 13th because they had a great run and they had a horrible collapse. Same thing for the Mets. The Padres had a higher summer score than the eventual World Series champion Braves. Last year, the only teams that had perfect summer scores were the Astros, the Yankees, oddly the Blue Jays, who fired their manager midway through the season, the Dodgers, the Mets, and the Padres. The Phillies didn't become a playoff team until July. And a team like Milwaukee, who missed the playoffs altogether, had a triple-digit summer score. Believe it or not, the Red Sox had a summer score of 53 last year. And the Orioles had a summer score of 6, and the Angels had a summer score of 7. So basically, you take and in the end, it kind of evens out. Yeah, the Angels had a rotten year, but they were in the playoffs for a couple of days, and then it was over. So I calculate this because those are teams, and some of those teams missed the playoffs altogether, and yet their fans had fun during the summer. They were able to go. Now, it may not have seemed like fun when they wound up losing the division in September, but guess what? That's not the summer. It's June, July, August. Oh, we're having fun watching our team. That's the purpose of a baseball team.
I want an anti-summer score for the Oakland A's this year because I want to see how many losses they can rack up. I want to see them be the first 35 and 127 team to just finish the season with by far the worst record. And I want to see what that summer score would be, where for every loss that they get 1 point added to their summer score.
Just think, as recently as August 23rd, 2021, an A's fan could wake up and say, our team's a playoff team today.
Whew. What happened to the talent?
Sent away.
Gone.
Sent away. That is the summer score. Miller Thomas of Locked On Diamondbacks, I need you to say to me which team you think is about to break out.
Oh, which team I think is about to break out? Okay, I like this game in the second half of the season. There's definitely some strong contenders. I mean, maybe the Yankees get healthy. You could pick a younger team like the Miami Marlins if you want. But for a nice second half breakout team, I think as they start to get healthy, I think health is a big question for this team because they're currently 500 at the time of us recording this podcast, but they're still loaded with talent. They got a new owner a few years ago who's not afraid to spend money on this team, and come the deadline, they might try to add more talent to this roster because the budget is never too large for this squad. I'm talking about the New York Mets, who are currently 27 and 27 at the time of us recording this. Verlander, who's starting to get healthy. Scherzer's been there for a lot of the season, but both of those guys haven't exactly clicked or looked like the salary that they're getting paid. So I think if those guys could start to heat up, even a guy like Francisco Lindor, we all thought he was back last year, but if you honestly look at his stats during his 3 years with the New York Mets, he's kind of underperformed to where he was in Cleveland. So if you can get him going in the second half, Pete Alonso, the polar bear, gets going, maybe your rookie Francisco Alvarez and your rookie Senga pick it up in the second half. Like, I think there's so many players on this Mets team that are, maybe star level quality, all-star level players that we consider, but are not exactly playing up to standards. I think if their better players start to pick it up in the second half, that's a team that could definitely break out because I think they're still so loaded with talent. I wouldn't be surprised if they made some real noise post Memorial Day.
I think you're right on that. I think the Mets are going to have a very good second third of the season. I think the Astros are about to just go on a rampage. I mean, the Astros have played very, very well. I mean, they've won 8 of their last 10 games, but it helps to go to Oakland. Oakland's probably going to lose their 50th game before they win their 15th, which is unbelievable. I think the Astros are about to just turn into a Godzilla film pretty soon. I'll tell you another team that, based upon what we've been saying a little bit, I think the Brewers are going to make a move, make some sort of move, some sort of trade for a bat that will be that spark plug. Yeah, I'm not saying they get a superstar. They're going to make a move to get a professional hitter in there, and that professional hitter will just kind of change the chemistry, change the biology of the lineup. And I think what's going to happen is the Brewers are – remember how last year the American League Central was completely just dense? And like only one game separated 3 teams for most of the year. And then Cleveland just said, F this. And they put on the aft thrusters and just won comfortably. I'm taking a look at this division. I love the Pirates. I think the Pirates are one of the most fun teams in baseball. I thought going into this year they had a chance to be a 500 team. And I think they probably will be a 500 team. But I don't think they're, unless some of their young players just explode, they're not there yet. The Reds are a fun story, but only because of the division that they're in. Like you were saying, in any other division, this would be, they stink. The Cubs, I think David Ross, I don't understand why he still has a job. And I do think that both David Ross and Schneider of the Blue Jays have to. You have to make the change. I mean Ross absolutely, and Schneider. We're seeing the Blue Jays, even with some of those wins against Minnesota, have just stumbled to the bottom of the standings. But the Cardinals are the team that have just stunned me. That they are just not. I was thinking, do I think the Cardinals are going to catch fire? And I've seen nothing about this Cardinal team that makes me think it's going to catch fire. And so I'm wondering if Milwaukee's going to take a look around and say, why don't we just make a couple of moves and just be better than everybody else? Where 90 wins means you probably win the division by 11 games. I think if 90 wins, you win this division comfortably. And so if I were Milwaukee, and I think Milwaukee has talent, they can pitch. And I think what they need is that big professional hitter in the middle of that lineup. Again, doesn't have to. We're not talking about them acquiring Mike Trout or something like that. Just a good, solid hitter in the middle of that lineup that will just keep the lineup moving and kind of, take some of the pressure off of the rest of them. And I think the Brewers are going to have a very good second third of the season. And as much as I would love to see a Pittsburgh or a Cincinnati win that division, right now, I just think Milwaukee looks like the only team that, is assuming that the Cardinals don't have a turnaround, that the Brewers will be the one that puts on the aft thrusters and eventually just puts everyone away.
I actually feel the totally opposite when it comes to the NL Central. I feel like this Brewers team is just a bunch of just smoke and mirrors right now. And I actually think they're going to have one of the biggest second half regresses in Major League Baseball. Just because I look up and down this team, you look at it currently, they have a negative run differential, one of the worst in their division.
I know.
Yeah, so they're only slightly behind the Cincinnati Reds when it comes to run differential. You look at their lineup just statistically, Rowdy Tellez is the only guy hitting above 800. Most of their guys, like Willy Adames, has been like their best offensive player the last couple of years, and he's currently injured, and he's having down season. Yelich is once again struggling. Jesse Winker hasn't done anything. Like, there's really no one in that lineup that's had that productive.
That's my point, that this is predicated on the team making a move. This is predicated entirely on the team saying, bringing in a professional hitter that will spark the rest of the lineup. As this team, that's why I said they'll look around and go, well, let's pick up this guy. And all of a sudden that one hitter suddenly takes the pressure off the Yelich's and everyone else, to start playing better. If they don't do that, then this is probably an 81 win team.
Yeah, I don't think there's any spark coming. I think you would honestly have to replace 3 to 4 different dudes in this lineup just because it hasn't worked the last few years. This offense is they've been looking for another batter the last few years. And when they do get that extra batter, like a Hunter Renfroe, they'll trade him in the offseason for a Jackie Bradley Jr. So I think this Brewers team, is going to be like how the Brewers handled the season last year, where they were a good first half season, where they were good in the first half of the season, and then they got to the deadline. What did they do? They traded away Josh Hader and kind of tanked in the second half of the season. I think we're going to see the same thing this year. We've already seen discussions about how Corbin Burns maybe hasn't exactly been happy so far with the Brewers this year, and he hasn't exactly lived up to being Corbin Burns this year. He's had a good season, but not like that elite Corbin Burns type of year. Freddie Peralta has struggled a little bit. Brandon Woodruff has been hurt. I think it's actually the perfect kind of year for the Brewers to have a reset. Their bullpen has been elite. You could trade away some bullpen arms if you want. You could trade some of those rotation starters if you want. And then honestly, a guy like Willy Adames, I think he's going to be a free agent this offseason, or he has an option. So it's you could just retool this whole thing if you're the Brewers, trade away some of your rotation guys, trade away some of your pitchers, maybe a trade of Willy Adames and restart this thing all over again. Yes, you're still in the worst division, but I do think that Cardinals team is getting hot. I do think they've played a little bit better in the month of May. I would have to check their record, but they still have way more talent than I think this Brewers team. They're 5 games back. If you're talking about the Reds of taking this division 4 games back, I'm going to look at the Cardinals 5 games back with still so much more talent. It's been a weird situation. They don't know whether they want to play Contreras in the outfield, DH catcher. It's been weird, but with the amount of talent that they have on paper, I'm looking at the Cardinals to take that division because I think the Brewers are going to have a major second half collapse. Intentionally, maybe.
Brewers are going to win the World Series.
Wow. That's go
to FanDuel.
Liquidate
your 401k.
Let's see.
Go to
I'm gonna try to
FanDuel.
look it up real quick. What those odds are on
Yeah.
on the Milwaukee Brewers to win the World Series.
Yeah. Let's say I take 100. Let's say I take $100 out right on a bet on the Brewers to win the World Series. What would I get back?
Let's see. I have it right here, actually. Milwaukee Brewers, they're plus 2,700. So I think if you put $1 down, you could get like 270 back.
What if I put 100 down?
You get 2,700 back.
There you go.
Boom. That sounds like amazing money. $100 though. You gotta be ready to lose.
What if I put $10,000 on?
Well, that $27,000. I'm guessing, now I'm not, we're in the math part of this podcast. It's not my strength, Sully Baseball.
All right. Well, do you know what your strength is? Putting on a great show. So tell people where they can follow your show.
Hey, follow me on, all your streaming platforms, Locked On Diamondbacks. Follow us on YouTube. Please hit subscribe on the Locked On Diamondbacks YouTube channel. If you want to follow us on social media, at Creator Thomas24 for my personal account, or look up Locked On Diamondbacks, both Twitter, Instagram for the podcast handle.
And you can follow me. I am your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. We didn't do a trivia question today, so the previous trivia question is still out there for those of you who is the only person to win a World Series for two different New York franchises. In order for this, and they had to have been someone who actually played in the postseason the year they won the World Series. So the only two players have won the World Series for two different New York franchises, and they were active players in the postseason for both of them. So send those answers to either Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram, or to the YouTube channel. And you can follow those at all those places. Talking about baseball as we start the summer score. And don't forget, the purpose of baseball is to entertain you in the summer. This has been a Locked On MLB, Locked On Diamondbacks crossover. Last one with this graphics format. Next week, brand new graphics will be on for this one too, like the other episode. He's Miller Thomas. I'm your pal Sully. Let's fist pump for another week.
Boom.